there. Good evening. Welcome to the Tunnel Podcast. It is match day -1 on match day 3 of the Scottish Premiership. I'm delighted to say we're joined by members of both clubs that are going to play on Sunday. We've got Gogsy representing North Lanarkshire. Gogsy, how are you doing?
Hello. How are we doing?
Really great to have you on, mate. Thanks very much. And we've got Scott McIntosh representing the capital. How are you doing, mate? All right?
Evening, lads. Very well, thanks.
Listen to podcast darling, as I say. Connor Chalmers has joined us tonight as well. Connor, you looking well?
Aye, all good. Glad to be on. Get into it with the lads. Always good to have a chat about other clubs and get the perspectives of their fans.
Absolutely. Okay, listen, if you're watching for the first time, like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell us what we're doing right, tell us what we're doing wrong, and I hope you enjoy the next 30 minutes or so. I think there's only one place really to start. Obviously, Hearts in European action last night, Scott. We're sort of talking off air before we came on. A 1-0 defeat, a late blow in Czech Republic.
Yeah, I think, the goal itself, I mean, it's easily avoided, but I think if you were to say to most Hearts fans prior to last night's game that they would come away with a 1-0 defeat, I think most people would have been quite comfortable with that, knowing that they've got the home leg to come up. So it's not completely out of sight yet, but I think the issue with next week is that it's going to probably highlight some of our major deficiencies that we might go on to talk about for the next half an hour or so in terms of our lack of threat going forward just now.
I think that's something that you could probably empathise with, Gogsy, as a lack of threat going forward, which I'm sure we'll come on to later on in the show. Scott, just in terms of the start to the season then, because I think that European defeat sort of marries into that. There is a real sort of lack of goals at the moment. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Hearts won any games in pre-season, and they've carried that on into the league form and obviously this European campaign as well.
Yeah, this is kind of a carry-on from last season. I think most people, without watching the team week in, week out, their sort of high-level sort of analysis of Hearts would be that we were third at a canter primarily due to being reasonably strong at the back, pretty decent out of possession in terms of shape, and then having Lauren Shankland having the season of all seasons, considering he's playing for a non-Old Firm club. So I think there was probably always going to be this risk that if Lauren Shankland doesn't start the season as well as he ended last season, that there was going to be sort of some deficiencies that would maybe become a bit more sort of stark within the squad. It's a difficult one. I felt towards the end of last season, we sort of went from a situation where I think Shankland first 4 or 5 months, I think he was probably putting together about 60% of our goals, or leading to about 60% of our overall goal tally. And then by about the end of the season, it went down to about 43-44%. So I felt like they were starting to maybe make some inroads towards that. Kenneth Vargas was starting to get a few more goals. The hope was that we were maybe going to recruit a little bit better over the summer, but we've focused primarily on what we can do to help sort of create goals rather than score them. We've obviously signed the likes of Danda and Blair Spittle, who Gogsy will be, well versed in sort of watching over the last couple of years. But unfortunately, I wouldn't say that we've dismissed our options up front. I just think that's still something that the club will probably be looking to work towards over the next 7 days, hopefully.
Gogsy, as an opposition fan looking in on Hearts, before the season kicks off, they've done some great recruitment, picking up probably the best of the rest, shall we say. He's already mentioned Scott there, Danda and Blair Spittle. Penrice comes in as well. They've got, Gerard Terraho will come on as well, comes in from Costa Rica. Before the ball was kicked, I think in Hearts look even stronger than last season.
Yeah, but I think, I predicted them to be third at a canter again this season, but you look at other sides like Aberdeen have strengthened and they don't have Europe to focus on at all this year. So I think Aberdeen are potentially a shoe-in for third place at the moment. But from what I've seen of Hearts, yes, they've added a lot of quality, but it's quality that they already had. So maybe they've not added to or improved on their squad. Maybe they just added more players that were as good as each other. So I think that might be their problem, the fact that they've not improved the squad. They've just added more of a depth. And as much as that's going to be a good thing, considering how many games they're going to be playing this season, it might just cancel everything out and there won't be any real standouts.
Conor, do you think Bugsy makes a point there in the sense that Stephen A. Smith's got a bigger job on in terms of managing all these players? It's a really big squad now. They're obviously trying to fight on all four fronts competitively, albeit out of the League Cup really early. You listen to Stephen A. Smith after defeated Dens, and he was kind of saying that maybe he needs to look at how often he is rotating.
Yeah, I think he does have that headache. I mean, look, in some ways you'd say it's not the worst headache in the world to have, because when you've got good quality players that you can bring into the squad, then happy days. The issue is, I think he's having made the signings of Spittle and Danda in particular. I think he's left himself in a position of being unsure what that strongest starting 11 looks like for him, in terms of how they fit in. And it takes time as well for players to bed in to a new club, new surroundings. I mean, Jan Danda, it is a jump for him going from Ross County to Hearts. Hearts are clearly a much bigger club. They've got higher aspirations than a Ross County. And of course, if you marry that with the European campaign that they will go on, whether it's in the Europa League or the Conference League, again, it's how do you meet that challenge of sort of Thursday night, Sunday afternoon kind of football. And listen, it will be tough, no doubt. I think the issue that Stephen Naismith's got is that he's. You can look at games like last night and go, well, unlucky to concede an own goal in the 96th minute of the game. Could have got out of there with a draw and take it back home all square, which is always ideal. But at the same time, you always say if it's only a 1-goal deficit, it's more than achievable that you can turn that around at home. The issue is there's not been any evidence so far to suggest that Hearts have got a couple of goals in them just now. I mean, you look at the Falkirk game. That's, for last week's a classic example. That's a game Hearts should be winning. Falkirk are playing really well and they deserve all the credit they got for last week. But for Hearts to go into that game off the back of a decent performance against Rangers, and then getting battered by Dundee, you kind of thought that might be the ideal game for them to provide a reaction. And again, I think he's made too many changes in that game and not enough quality with the end product at the top of the park has left them wanting. And it's not just at the top of the park. You look at the goals they conceded against both Dundee and Falkirk as well. Defensively, some poor errors. Keeping in there, Taylor, who had a great game against Rangers, has not, lit up the headers since then. He's had a couple of mistakes, which, listen, that happens. So, yeah, it's a tough road. The issue is right now, he's got to try and pick up as many points as he can in the interim before the main European campaign gets going, because once it happens, it's only going to become harder for them.
You made some great points. I'm going to try and go through them chronologically if I can. Scott, just in terms of Europe then, because we'll box that off here, is there sort of less pressure on Thursday night with that? You've also got the safety net that you're going to be in the Conference League anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there continues to be a bit of a debate amongst fans around whether it would actually benefit not only ourselves but also the coefficient for Scotland if we did actually drop down into the conference. There's potentially 2 or 3 more winnable ties if we do that, whereas with the Europa League there's probably the kind of luster of sort of having bigger names associated with the ties. But again, are we in a position where we're ready for that? I would probably say no. Looking at Pleasant last night, I don't think they were a particularly great side, and they still looked technically more sort of proficient than we did. So yeah, there's probably an argument to say that. For me, though, I want to see us win games. So if that means winning and going through and taking the consequences of that, then so be it. But I think we're in a position just now where we need to kind of get the momentum started. Hopefully that's going to be on Sunday. Last night was maybe a bit of a baby step towards it. I think defensively we did look more sound. We were back to that familiar back three that we had for the majority of last season. But again, having that back three does affect our system in the final third. And this is where Naismith is struggling just now. He's trying to get the balance within the team. But against Falkirk, we saw the other extreme of that, where he started with possibly our 2 slowest centre-halves, starting in a system that was pretty akin to a sort of 2-4-4 at times. You had sort of Taylor and Penrice playing as inverted sort of wing backs, and it just left Halkett and Kingsley exposed, unfortunately. And because we didn't take our chances in the first 20 minutes, it sort of came back and bit us on the backside. So he's got a lot to ponder just now, but I think the good thing about Sunday's fixture is that I think we're facing a side that have had similar amount of churn over the summer in terms of ins and outs. And I think Motherwell are still trying to find a bit of an identity in terms of what I watched of them. I think in terms of recruitment, and this is very much from the outside looking in, but a lot of the forward recruitment looks a bit like we're just going to throw as much as we can at the wall and hope that one or two of those purchases maybe sort of stick. So yeah, I think both clubs just now find themselves in a position where they're still trying to find the right blend and balance in the squad, and I think that's maybe still going to take a few weeks, unfortunately.
Gogsy, just something I picked up on last night from Derek McInnes. Obviously, they lost in Copenhagen as well. And you can hear him just saying that, the priority is Europe. They speak about, financially, it's just so much more vast in terms of what you can bring in from any sort of prize money in Scotland, certainly. Is that what we're seeing now? Is clubs are, obviously St Mirren as well, they're having to prioritise Europe over the start of the domestic campaign and then just play catch-up later on?
I think that's the case. I've seen so many other Scottish clubs falter early on in Europe, and then, they've been ready for the start of the season. But the problem is the first competitive kick is in European football for Scotland. So, I don't want to start throwing about, we should be playing summer football, etc. But it would definitely help, in my opinion, because you've seen the likes of Falkirk Falter Vaduz or Queen of the South coming in playing against the Danish side, and there's so much of a mismatch. St Mirren were playing against a team that were 17 matches into their season with 5 to go. St Mirren drew in Iceland, but still, a win is more ideal, of course. So if we're able to at least sort of alter our seasons so we can actually compete in Europe, because this season is more imperative than ever before, because we're almost at a stage where we can't have a team in the Champions League proper until they play in qualifiers. And if we get to that stage, then I don't know if there's going to be anywhere back.
Scott, I'll come back to you on the domestic stuff. Then I know you sort of dipped your toe in, RE Falkirk. I watched the game, and as you say, first half, 3 or 4 chances, Vargas sits underside the bar. They really should have put that game to bed. And then, Falkirk, who are actually a decent football side, I have to say, really impressed with them. I think John McGlynn's doing a great job there. Obviously went through last season unbeaten, and I would say they're going to be in amongst it to come up to the Scottish Premiership come the end of the current season. What was your sort of take, and where does it sort of leave sort of pressure in terms of Stephen Naismith? Because I'm guessing at the start of the season, Hearts fans will be saying we can go for a cup this season.
Yeah, and I think this kind of ties in a little bit with what Gogsy was saying there about, maybe starting the league campaign maybe earlier and maybe playing over the summer months. I think what happens is that for clubs outside of the Old Firm, we know that there's only 2 realistic chances of silverware come the end of the season, one of them being the League Cup. But the problem is there is this priority sort of crisis that you have in terms of conflicts of interest between the League Cup and the European sort of early campaigns for a lot of these sides. And I can understand, I don't think all the changes were because we were aware that we had a game coming up on Thursday. We've got a lot of players that have missed a lot of football over the last couple of seasons, and I think they potentially looked at the Falkirk fixture as a good opportunity to give the likes of Halkett and probably Liam Boyce some minutes that they've not had for quite some time. So I think there would have been changes regardless of what sort of European sort of stage or phase we were in. But you look at it and there definitely has to be something in it. When you look at the sort of match sharpness, you can even see it in pre-season fixtures. You can see it when Celtic maybe square up against some English Premiership teams. You can see the difference that sometimes 2 or 3 weeks of pre-season can make in terms of us maybe starting pre-season in July and then maybe starting towards the end of the month due to the fact that they've had the Euros. So there's definitely something in it. I think the proof, the proof is definitely there. It's just whether the authorities really have an appetite to move it. I don't know how it affects things with regards to TV deals. But I think if you were to speak to a lot of the clubs outside of the Old Firm, potentially the Old Firm themselves, they would probably think that it'd be quite a good idea moving forward.
Connor, just briefly on this, I don't want to turn this into a summer football debate, but is there an argument there that we should be trying to help the clubs more? I know Kilmarnock tried to get Sunday's game sort of shifted against Aberdeen. That's not going to happen. To try and help them, should the SPFL, the SFA, be doing a little bit more to try and support the clubs and give them the best chance to try and boost the coefficient?
But of course they should. It's always been absurd to me that they don't. I mean, at the end of the day, it benefits the whole of Scottish football if your teams do well in Europe and they're able to win games of football. We've seen there, obviously, this season we've dropped out of the top 10 in the coefficient, which means no automatic Champions League spot is available anymore. That will trickle down, obviously, in terms of the starting qualifying rounds for some other teams in Europa League and Conference League football. And the thing is, when that happens, you've got to want to put energy into making sure that you're giving your teams the best opportunity to build that back up again. Because it doesn't take long. If you get a couple of teams in Europe that can win games of football or do okay, then those points can be added back up again and you can get those automatic spots back in top competitions. And we don't do it. Listen, it's nothing new. We've seen it in the past. I mean, this goes back, if you look at 2008, for example, Rangers got to a European final in the UEFA Cup, the first Scottish club to do so of the 21st century. And when they requested to have a game changed because they were going to have to play, I think, something like 3 games in 7 days, they were turned down. They said no, the SPL as it was at the time. And nothing's changed since it became the SPFL. There's not much movement. That being said, a lot of that can be driven by the clubs themselves. At the end of the day, it's the clubs ultimately who can make these changes. They can force the SPFL to take votes on these things and pass it through. And some of the issue, I'm afraid to say, comes down to the fact that there are some clubs who are not in Europe who don't particularly have any benefit to allowing fixtures to be rescheduled or to be as accommodating as that, because understandably, for example, if you're a Motherwell this weekend, you're playing a Hearts team coming off the back of a game away from home in Europe on Thursday night. So you would want to play Hearts at that point rather than when they're fresher, because it gives you a better opportunity of getting the win, particularly as well when you're playing that game in front of your home fans. So yeah, there has to be a change, but all of the clubs have to want that change to happen. Otherwise, it just won't.
Yeah, listen, that's a wider debate for another day. Just quickly then, Scott, the window's going to slam shut, as they say, this time next week. I wanted to go through a couple other players you bought in, but the big one for that everyone obviously been talking about probably for about 6 months is Lawrence Shankland. Interestingly, I've probably seen the bits and pieces on social media where some Hearts fans were saying he looked overweight. He's not looked in shape. He's not looked at his best. Do you still think, come next Saturday, he'll still be a Hearts player?
Yeah, it's quite funny because it's pretty much deja vu. There was the same concerns last year. I think his partner had given birth to either their second or their third child over the summer, and he did come back and he did look a little bit off it in terms of match sharpness.
Are you suggesting he was carrying baby weight?
Well, potentially, yeah. I mean, I think one of the things about Shankland is sometimes his body language is not the best. Now, people who are a lot closer to him at the club will always sort of, try and put my mind at rest and say, look, it's just because he wants to win. He just gets a bit upset when they're not winning, and sometimes that can manifest in how he carries himself on the park. I think he'll still be at Hearts. I don't think that's all chiefly down to what he wants. I think he would maybe want to get away. I think he knows that there's one last chance for him to get a lucrative deal elsewhere. I think Hearts have pretty much showed their hand in terms of how much they want to offer him, and it's still a little bit off not just what he wants per week, but also what his agents want as their cut as well. So I still think there's a bit of a sizable gap between the two parties. In terms of the clubs that would maybe be interested in him, I just think he lacks that yard pace that clubs down south would look at. And when I say down south, I'm talking about Championship. I'm not suggesting English Premiership in any way, shape or form, but he does lack that sort of bursty pace that I think they would look for. There's resale value. There's no resale value in him as well. So again, you might find that if a championship club have maybe had a poor start to the season, it might get to the 29th or 30th of this month and they might think, do we maybe just take a bit of a gamble on him? But I don't think it's going to be the types of clubs that he's going to want to have maybe, made that move too. I think all the chat about Rangers and Celtic, I think it's fair to say, and Connor can, maybe chime in and maybe tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think the problem Rangers have is not being able to stretch teams in the final third. I don't think Lawrence Shankland helps with that issue. I know a lot of people are quite happy to say that Shankland's a huge improvement on Dessers, but I don't think that's the case. Do I think Lawrence Shankland in a Rangers jersey might contribute 5 to 10 goals more than Dessers over a season? I think he would, but again, it would be in fixtures that I think Rangers are already going to win by a couple of goals anyway. Whether he would be the difference maker in Europe and Celtic, probably not. And for the same reasons, I don't think Celtic would be in for him either. So I think he'll be at us, but I don't think it'll be through any lack of trying from his agents, at least.
Is there maybe a slight concern though when you look at obviously the kind of price tag Hearts would want to command for Lawrence Shankland is understandable, but we had this conversation quite recently on another show we do about Scottish football, and he's not got long left in his contract. This is his last 12 months, and if Hearts can't get a deal done with him to extend that contract, then by January he can start negotiating a pre-contract with other clubs. Which means Hearts could lose out not just on a quality player, but a couple of £1 million as well if they can't get this done. So, the clock's almost ticking a bit.
So I understand that concern, but I think if you look at it purely from a club point of view, Lawrence Shankland, I think it's fair to say most people agree last year's the difference between us and getting that pot of gold from getting guaranteed European football, which is at least 5 or 6 million. So if keeping Lawrence Shankland for another 12 months leads to us getting another third spot, I know that's maybe a bit of a wild take just now, given how we've started the season, but if that's the difference maker again, then it's worth keeping him rather than selling him for 2 million and losing out on that spot. So I do understand that argument, but I think the club have done everything right up to this point. From what I know of what they've offered them, I think the club are trying to do their best, not only to do right by him and try and show him that they do value him highly, because this is a big argument. If you value someone at 5 million when clubs come sniffing, you surely have to offer him a wage that's reflective of the transfer value. And I think they've tried to do that as best as they can, without obviously putting other people's noses out of joint. And this is the fine balance, it's making sure that you're not only keeping Lawrence Shankland happy, but you're not upsetting the rest of the group as well.
Okay, then we will come along the M8 towards Lanarkshire, and Gogs, you'll put a bit of focus on it yourself. I know you've been quiet there for the last few minutes or so. So Motherwell, I wanted to go back actually, if we can, just to the start of the season. A lot of talk about Wild Sheep Sports coming in, and Eric Barmack, and then obviously the Welsh Society got involved, and it got quite sort of, I won't say ugly, but maybe a bit messy at the start of the season when you thought Motherwell were actually going to get some investment and maybe push forward. The Welsh Society seemed to be in control.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I think everyone's got a price, and I don't think Eric Barmack met that price for us. I mean, yeah, it'd be great to have investment, but also it's the problem was that it wasn't enough. Like, I think it was on average over a course of like 6 years, it was like 300 grand a year, which in Scotland that's still a fair amount of money. But I think Motherwell values itself bigger than just what would be 2 and a bit million over 6 years. But for me, I don't think it's just the money that we've missed out on. I think it's the contacts that we've missed out on as well, because Eric Barmack's got a lot of contacts across the pond, and I think had we gone through with such a partnership, then I think we'd have got a better partnership after it. But I think it's a case of there's not enough business savvy people in Motherwell that would be willing to maybe take that leap. I don't want to put myself out there saying that I'm a business guru of sort, but I think the wealth of contacts that Eric Barmack was displaying, I think would have been a good advantage to have.
Conor, is that something you've got along with? The Motherwell have maybe missed the boat here As Scott touched on earlier, they've been very active in the transfer market. They've obviously, I'm guessing, they've used the money that Theo Bayer transfers brought in. But what's the sort of the long-term strategy in terms of trying to push the club forward and maybe, as Log says, open up some other doors and some other avenues?
Yeah, I mean, listen. The thing is, I think the one thing about Motherwell, there's not an overriding urgency. I don't feel that they don't have to sell themselves short. And the reality is, a club like Motherwell, there is a good value to that, because you're talking about a club who's sort of in the central belt of Scotland. You're just outside of Glasgow. You can attract decent levels of players to come and play for the club, especially when you look at the fact they've also got a fairly decent history as well throughout Scottish football. And I think any investor coming in has to respect that and has to understand that, as Gogsy said, everybody's got a price, and you're going to have to meet those challenges and those prices in order to get there. I think one of the things for Motherwell that when they lost Alan Burrows was a concern, was the idea of how do you replace what he did for the club, because he was fantastic for Motherwell, not just in terms of business wise and club wise and players wise, but the fans as well. He gave a lot back to them, which was fantastic. And I think you need that as well, because the one thing about clubs like Motherwell is they are community clubs. Areas like that, that's what it's all about. And I mean, I see Motherwell Stadium on a regular basis because I work across the road from it. So, even that in itself is a great stadium. I do think that, that investment long-term strategy, I think some improvements to the stadium, I don't know if Gogsy would agree, wouldn't be a bad idea, because it is a fantastic stadium, but it's also been there a while now as well. And, there's nothing wrong with tweaking things and maybe just increasing even your capacity or whatever, because I think Motherwell's a fantastic club who could do that. But again, it's about the right investors coming in the door and making sure you stick by your guns, because I hate seeing clubs like Motherwell selling themselves short and just accepting a bid for the sake of getting money in the door, rather than doing the proper thing and making sure that it's the right price you want and that it's the right people who are coming in to run it, who are going to understand the functions of a club like Motherwell and the place it has in its local community and within Scottish football. Because I don't think it's a push to say Motherwell as a club should be up there competing alongside, Aberdeen, Hearts, Hibs and all the rest of it for that sort of third spot. And even, like a Hearts, why not have the ambition to say one day let's go and try and challenge to break up the Old Firm as well? It can be done.
I put them in my prediction for the top 6 this year. I would love to change that with a bit of Tipex if I could at the minute. Gogsy, we look at the start to the season. Obviously, you've got Hearts on Sunday, and as Scott said there, quite a similar start to the campaign. That 0-0 draw with Ross County. I dare say if there hadn't been only 2 matches on the Saturday, you wouldn't have got 30 minutes on Sports Scene. Let's put it that way. Ross Laidlaw probably started the game. You've lost Theo Bayer. Is that the real issue here, that you've lost that goal threat that you had from last year?
I don't think so, because this time last year we were thinking he isn't a goal threat. So we've developed him into a fantastic player, because he was an unearthed gem. Let's be honest. He scored 1 goal in 12 appearances for St Johnstone's the season previous, and no one had expected him to come and hit the ground running. And it took him a while, because we'd signed Mika Viereth, who ended up getting a £4 million transfer to Sturm Graz in the summer just there. And that was partially down to playing for us in the first half of last season. And he went back to Arsenal, went on loan to Sturm Graz, and just kicked on from there. So we already had a void to fill, and Theo Bayer had been a bit part player in the first half of last season, and then all of a sudden he kicked into gear, and we focused the play around him, and that was where he was scoring his goals, because we were focusing the play around him. It wasn't that he was part of the squad, he was the main man, and that's why we've had so many successful strikers in the past, Louis Moult, Michael Higdon. It's because we've always focused the play around the number 9 or number 14 in Theo Bayer's case. But now he's away. I mean, I think it's a great achievement to make what's probably going to be about $2.5 million from him, considering where he got us in the league with his goals, where he he got the bonuses in from the Copa America, playing for Canada, getting to third place, and also the add-ons from the transfer that we're eventually going to get come the end of his time at Auxerre. So I think it's not real. I wouldn't say it's a loss. I mean, his presence is a loss at the moment, but usually we start off very slow and we only start playing our best football in the latter stages of the season, and that's what happens every year. It's the same cycle. So I'm not excited at the moment, but come the next 3 or 4 months when we're actually well gelled as a team before the next exodus next season, I think we'll be all right.
Well, just to come
in, Conor.
I just wanted to come back to Gogsy, because the interesting thing, I don't know where you're at with Stuart Kettlewell in the dugout. I mean, there was obviously at one point last season, having actually started quite well, and we were singing his praises at one point last season because there was a great run of form. But when it dropped off, you really worried that he might have been out the door. But the board or whatever stuck by him, and have obviously trusted him to take it forward. Do you still think he can take the club up that level for this season?
Well, we've seen over many a year. We had the likes of Stephen Robinson, who was manager, and like everyone was singing his praises when he got us to 2 cup finals in one season. But then when things did get tough, we didn't stick by him, and he ended up leaving after, I think it was a 13 or 14 match streak without a win, and it came to the 31st of December in COVID season, and he decided he was away. So I think that it is a time where, like, I think it might actually be soon. I think this may be Kettlewell's last season. But I mean, he's doing everything he can, but the problem is, like, it's almost as if our training grounds to Takeshi's Castle, because we have so many injuries at the moment. And like we're linked with about 3 or 4 more strikers coming in, and we've already signed about 3 or 4 this season. So it's going to be a revolving door at Wishy General.
Scott, I'll come to you, try and compose myself here. Obviously, travelling there on Sunday afternoon, you look at Stuart Kettlewell has been very vocal probably for the last 3 or 4 weeks about just how decimated his side are with injuries. I've just smashed the laptop there. You listen to you're speaking after the game on Sunday against Kilmarnock, yet to score, I think, a goal in 90 minutes, Conor was informing me before we came on here. So, it could be a case of two sides really struggling for any real potency in attack and a real sort of battle in the middle of the pitch.
Yeah, I think the main opportunity that I think we'll have on Sunday is in midfield. I think that's where Motherwell look like they're really struggling. Again, this is something, it's just through my basic sort of knowledge of Motherwell, but I look at somebody like Lennon Miller, and after watching him over the last sort of 12, 18 months, just for me anyway, I think he's better playing in a slightly deeper role where he's got more of the game in front of him. I think playing in that sort of 10, they've got him playing almost like it's sort of like 2 10s they've been playing with recently, Gogsy, isn't it? Because they've not really had any sort of wide options. So I don't think that really suits them. And then the people that they're having to play in that sort of double pivot, I mean, Andy Halliday, there's a reason why we let him go last season, because his legs had pretty much went from under him. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Back.
Well, the weird thing is, he will have something to prove to Stephen Naismith on Sunday, so it wouldn't surprise me if he maybe popped up with a goal. But yeah, I think that's probably where our main opportunity comes on Sunday. I think there's a real opportunity to gain some control in midfield. But to an extent, Motherwell might be quite happy letting us have possession as long as it's in our own half and it's in areas where we don't offer any threat. I think this is where teams have sort of sussed Hearts out over the last sort of not just 12 months, but probably over the last sort of couple of seasons. I think we can be quite passive, especially away from home. And I think this is where Motherwell have done well against us in previous fixtures. Motherwell have been really aggressive, and they've dictated the tempo of the game in that opening 15, 20 minutes. And we've never really fully recovered from that. So that's one of the things I'd like to see change. But yeah, I think given all the sorts of ills and issues that both clubs have just now, it wouldn't surprise me if it was a sort of low-scoring draw. I'm hoping for 2-0 Hearts, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see a 1-1 here.
Gogsy, obviously you mentioned Andy Halliday, and all jokes aside, you've been linked this week with Ryan Jack, his former teammate. Is that something you can see happening? Obviously, Ryan Jack's he's a free, so it doesn't need to be rushed before the end of the window. But is that an area you'd like to see strengthening? And is Ryan Jack the sort of type that you would maybe consider a coup for Motherwell?
Well, right now, I would say we need to look at quality instead of quantity, because as of our last fixture, we played 6 defenders, 3 defensive midfielders, and 1 up top. So I don't think we need a defensive player right now to add to the squad. However, I would happily make an exception for Ryan Jack. I think he'd be a fantastic signing. But at the same time, we've got to look at strengthening up front, funnily enough, because we've signed about 4 strikers, but like every time a striker hits the training pitch, they're away injured for another 3 or 4 weeks. So
you were there on Sunday. Talk to me about Mazwanisi, because apparently when he came on, he was the sort of player that's going to get you off the edge of your seat.
100%. Like, I actually signed him in Football Manager 21, and he was fantastic for me as a Motherwell manager back then. So it's a bit of reality hitting for once. But yeah, he was absolutely fantastic. Every time we got the ball, you're like, oh, something good's going to happen. It's the first time we've had a winger like that since Boli Aribi, and I think it was 18-19. And like, I've been trying to think who we can get as an exciting winger that can, light up Fir Park. And for once, we've managed to get one in. Unfortunately, he's only in contract till January, but I think it's with a view that he's probably going to get a bigger move should he light up the league, hopefully, like he will.
Colin, I'll come to you then. Just on a sort of wider scale with the 2 clubs we're speaking about tonight. Yeah, if we can't go too early on it. I know they've both had a bit of a stuttering start to the season. Stuart Kettlewell dealing with a lot of injuries. Stephen Aisworth probably still trying to suss out what his best 11 is. We've seen last season, albeit the top 3 were miles away from the rest, but you can always claw it back. A couple of wins and you're back up, a couple of losses you're back down.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, that's the twists and turns. I think the 3rd place downward, it is that way. I mean, Hearts, to their eternal credit, managed to put forward an incredible run of consistency last season, which allowed them to build such a gap over the rest of the teams, because in that mile when they're playing each other, usually there's points to be dropped constantly, and if you can pick up points against teams that would be perceived as direct competitors to you, then that's the best place to start. I mean, look, it's early doors. It's only game day 3 in the league that we're getting into. There's plenty of time left to go. As I say, I think I still fancy that Hearts will get over the line in 3rd, although I think it'll be a lot tighter, particularly when you look at what Jimmy Taylor's doing up at Aberdeen. They look like they're going to be a real danger this season. But you in terms of Motherwell, never ever write them off either. They've done it in the past. They actually finished 2nd, not so long ago in the league, pipping Aberdeen to the post, and they can get themselves into that position again. The thing for Motherwell as well, the carrot that's in front of them to do that, when they see, Hearts and Aberdeen having European group stage football campaigns, there's no reason Motherwell can't have that as well, and that brings in some money into the club as well, which always helps, because that then helps reinvest, as Gogs is talking about, in that quality of player rather than just the quantity. So I think absolutely, I think both clubs will more than likely be okay once everybody's fighting fit and ready to go as the campaign goes on. And I do think, just as a aside, I think Ryan Jack would be a great signing for Motherwell on a free, because I agree with Gogsy in terms of they don't really need any more defensive players when you look at the list they've got. But what he brings to the midfield that I think Motherwell are slightly lacking is that experience edge. Because you look at Motherwell's midfield and there's a lot of youth in it. Obviously, I know you've got guys like Ross Callahan, for example, who obviously used to play across the road at the Neighbours in Hamilton. And obviously, you could argue Andy Halliday's got experience, but not to the level that Ryan Jack can bring. This is a guy who's played deep in the heart of European competitions, knows what it means to be playing under intense pressure constantly, and that can only help the players around you. So I think that would be a massive bonus to bring somebody like that in, and then take it from there. But I think Motherwell, I had them, if I'm not mistaken, think I had them in 6th place. I think I had them in my predictions, and I think they'll be fine to get there. I'd certainly like to see them get there. You know, I'm an North Lanarkshire boy as well, like Gogsy. So you've got to want the Lanarkshire teams to do all right.
Okay. Listen, just before we call it a day, I'm just going to come to you both. Scott, I'll come to you first. A quick prediction just for Sunday's match.
I always want to be positive, so I'm going to go 2-0 Hearts. I think midfield's going to be the key area, so yeah, 2-0 Hearts.
And just, do you think there'll be a lot of changes with Thursday's game in mind, or
less than what we saw Falkirk last week? Probably might be sort of maybe just 3 or 4, maybe just freshen up certain areas of the team. But yeah, I don't think you'll see too many compared to last week.
Gogsy, do you want to give us a prediction as well, mate?
A 0-0 draw.
Oh, anti-football. Another 0-0 draw at Firth Park. The season ticket holders are getting treated there this season.
It's not anti-football, it's being realistic. I mean, neither side seems to be able to hit a barn door with a shotgun, so it's just screaming a 0-0 draw for me.
It's a fair shout. And just on, I wanted to just quick touch on the injuries themselves. Like, I think once that's sorted, then we will see Motherwell push up the table.
I'd like to see so, but we've been having so many. It's like every other week there's a new injury. And I think if we're not if we're more careful, then I think we'll be all right. But I think it's a regular theme with Kettlewell's teams, because he had the same problem at Ross County, and he's had this issue ever since the first 6 months at Motherwell. So if he can't get it sorted, then we're going to have an ongoing issue of players coming in to play for 6 months and then being injured again.
Listen, as I say, we'll draw a line under it there. Listen, thanks to my guests tonight, Scott McIntosh, Gogsy, and obviously Connor as well. If you are watching on catch up, as I say, leave us a little comment. We'd enjoy that. We will be back with another SPFL show in a week's time. The EFL show's back at the weekend. As I say, delighted for you to be here tonight. And thanks to my guests. Have a good evening. Cheers.